Hello there. The BBC really was biased against Brexit, and research now shows that pro-Brexit voices have been marginalised by the broadcaster. Leave voters are already pretty convinced that the BBC has for many years been very anti-Brexit, hence why they have dubbed it the Brussels Broadcasting Corporation. The BBC has always, of course, vehemently denied this, saying that it prides itself on its impartiality. But a report out today from Civitas paints a very different picture. The paper, written by David Keighley and Andrew Jubb, says that despite there being a very large proportion of the UK population who wanted to leave the EU, the BBC has always weighted the debate in favour of Remain. In fact, the foreword to the piece by David G. Green says that the BBC used a sort of plausible deniability approach by putting a couple of Brexiteers on the guest list for show, but then interrogating them heavily whilst treating the many Remainer guests with kid gloves. The report says that evidence gathered by Newswatch shows pro-Brexit voices have been marginalised in the BBC's coverage of EU issues for most of the past 20 years. And if this is right, can you imagine the result of the referendum had the coverage been properly impartial? That this is the case is borne out by detailed analysis of BBC News output dating back to 1999. For instance, of 4,275 guests talking about the EU on BBC's Radio 4's flagship Today programme between 2005 and 2015, only 132, 3.2%, were supporters of the UK's withdrawal from the EU, says the report. Let's look at some other numbers. In 274 hours of monitored BBC coverage of EU issues between 2002 and 2017, only 14 speakers, 0.2% of the total, were left-wing advocates of leaving the EU. These 14 contributors delivered 1,680 words, adding up to approximately 12 minutes out of 274 hours of airtime. Whereas over the same period, strongly pro-EU Conservatives, Ken Clarke and Michael Heseltine, made between them 28 appearances with contributions totalling 11,208 words, over 9 times the amount of airtime allocated to all left-wing withdrawalists. In the Today programme Business News covering the 6 months after the EU referendum, only 10 of 366 speaker contributions, that's 2.9%, were from supporters of withdrawal from the EU. And in October to November last year, of 68 non-politically allied speakers in the Brexit-related coverage on the Today programme, 52 were anti-Brexit or pro-EU, and only 16 were pro-Brexit or anti-EU. An imbalance of worse than 3-1, and that's despite the Leave vote. The report also makes a scathing attack on the BBC complaints procedure, saying that the corporation is impervious to all complaints of bias and just carries on regardless. The deluge of EU-related bias chronicled by Newswatch is incontrovertible evidence of very fundamental problems in the BBC's approach to impartiality, says the report. Throughout the 18 years of monitoring, despite opinion polls showing strong and often majority support for leaving the EU, the BBC has effectively ignored the findings and carried on regardless in seriously underreporting and at times ignoring the case for withdrawal. As moves towards Brexit grind forward, the fingers in ears approach continues, with Europe editor Katja Adler leading the charge of corporation journalists seemingly focused on the perspective and interests of Brussels more than those in the UK who voted decisively in favour of leaving the EU. And the managing director of Newswatch, David Keighley, says that the BBC has been unable to supply to it a single BBC programme since the referendum which has examined the opportunities of Brexit. Newswatch has been scouring the schedules to spot one, but in vain. And UK citizens pay a licence fee for this brainwashing service. It beggars belief. Anyway, moving on to the economy. The latest gross domestic product figures from the Office for National Statistics shows that GDP increased by 0.5% in the last quarter of 2017, which is a little higher than most pundits had estimated. And GDP increased over the whole year by 1.8%. So the economy is still growing. But of course, now that there has not been the fallback the Remain side was banking on, they have been forced to adjust to the new narrative that growth would have been higher if we'd voted to remain. And finally, in a hard-hitting speech at Churches College in Petersfield yesterday, Jacob Rees-Mogg said that unless the UK grasps this tremendous opportunity that exiting the EU offers, then Brexit will just be a damage limitation exercise, saying, "The British people did not vote for that. They did not vote for the management of decline. They voted for hope and opportunity, and politicians must now deliver it." He also said that for too long our negotiators seem to have been cowed by the EU. Their approach seems to be that we must accept what the EU will allow us to do and build from there. This is no way to negotiate, and it is no way for this country to behave, he said. And he is, of course, right. We need to be bold, remove ourselves from the EU as quickly as possible, and get out of there into the real world. No transition, no payments, no single market, no customs union, and of course, absolutely no ECJ jurisdiction. What do you think? Please leave a comment below. Thank you. Please do like and share this video, and also subscribe to my channel. And when subscribing, please do remember to press on the little bell next to the subscribe button. That way you'll get an alert every single time I put up a new video. Thank you very much for watching.